Okay, let's dig into this. Get this statistic. 9 out of 10 Nordic office workers. They say a good social environment is like a make or break thing for a new job.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty clear-cut, doesn't it? We want connection at work. But there seems to be a twist coming.
There really is, and that's what we're exploring in this deep dive,
Yeah.
looking at Castellum's 2025 Future of Work report. It's fascinating stuff.
Right.
Based on, over 4,000 people in Sweden, Finland, Denmark. We want to get past the headlines, understand what people really prioritize, the problems they face, and importantly, what this might mean for you listening right now.
So this big need for a social workplace, how does that actually square with, well, getting work done feels like a potential clash?
That's exactly the core tension the report brings out. On one hand, yes, that social vibe is a huge draw.
Definitely.
But on the other hand, a big chunk, 58%, said they actually prefer working alone, or maybe with just one other person, when they need quiet and concentration.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
And what's really telling is a major complaint about modern offices, about a third of people mention this, is just finding it hard to focus. Too many distractions.
All right, that totally resonates. You love the buzz sometimes, but trying to hit a deadline, an open office can feel chaotic.
Exactly. And Helene Lidstrom, she's a workplace strategist at Castellum. She really hits the nail on the head with this.
What did she say?
She talks about how tough it is to concentrate in those open plan setups or the activity-based ones. She basically calls being able to work without constant interruptions a kind of hygiene factor. Like, it's a basic need for a functional office.
A hygiene factor. I like that. So what are the actual office setups like for these Nordic workers? What's the reality on the ground?
Well, the report shows most are in open plan offices. That's the dominant model still.
Okay.
Within that, about a third have their own dedicated desk, which gives some sense of personal space. And then around a fifth are in those activity-based offices, where you don't have a fixed spot, flexible seating.
Right. Activity-based, choose your zone depending on the task. Sounds efficient in theory. Is it working out?
Well, the data suggests maybe a bit of a disconnect there.
Oh.
Yeah, the Castellum study found a pretty clear link between the type of workspace and how satisfied people are, and also how much time they actually spend in the office.
Interesting.
So people with more separate spaces, like a private office or maybe sharing with just a couple of others, they tend to report being happier.
Okay.
And they actually choose to work from the office more days per week compared to folks in the big open plan or activity-based environments.
Huh. So it makes you wonder if the big push towards totally open or flexible offices is actually meeting everyone's needs.
Exactly. It raises that question.
It feels like for quite a while now, the narrative has been all about remote work taking over, maybe even the death of the office.
Yeah, that was the prediction.
But this Nordic report, it seems to be hinting at something else, maybe a shift back.
You're absolutely spot on. That trend of working from home full-time, it's definitely easing off in the Nordic region.
Really?
Yeah, and what's quite striking is that more office workers are actually open to the idea of mandatory days back in the office.
Wow. Okay. After all this time.
It seems so. After about 5 years of hybrid and remote work being so widespread, there's this growing feeling 9 out of 10 people agree on this, that the physical office, it's essential.
Essential for what specifically?
For building company culture, for that feeling of team cohesion, that sense of belonging.
That's a really strong endorsement for the physical space, especially now. What's driving that renewed appreciation, do you think?
One really interesting angle is how important the office seems to be for the well-being of younger workers.
Younger workers, like who?
Specifically, the 25 to 34 age group. Get this. 86% of them feel that being in the office has a positive effect on their mental well-being.
86%, that's huge.
It is. And 82% say it helps their physical health, too.
Why do you think that is, for that group in particular?
Well, speculation here, but it could be about social connection, maybe mentorship opportunities that happen more organically in person.
Yeah, those water cooler moments.
Exactly. And perhaps just the structure and routine the office provides, which might be especially helpful earlier in a career.
And it's not just a feeling, right? They actually want to be in the office more. Did the numbers show that?
They absolutely do. The average number of days people want to be in the office across the Nordics has been creeping up steadily.
Okay.
It went from 2.63 days a week back in 2023 to 2.75 last year, and this latest report puts it at 2.83 days.
So nearly 3 days a week on average. Any differences between the countries?
Yeah, there are. Sweden actually shows the strongest pull towards the office. They average 3.45 desired days a week.
Wow, over 3.5 days.
Then Denmark is close behind at 3.38 days, and Finland at 3.13 days, so all showing a preference for a significant office presence.
So the office is definitely not dead. It's maybe being reevaluated. But hang on, even with this pullback, surely the flexibility we've all gotten used to still counts for something. People don't want to give that up entirely, do they?
Oh, absolutely not. That's crucial. While the office's appeal is growing, having the option to work remotely sometimes or on certain days, that's still really important to most people.
How important?
Very. The report found 44%, nearly half said hybrid work availability is a decisive factor when they're choosing a new job.
Decisive. Okay.
And another 39% said it's at least a partial factor they consider. Only about 14% said it wasn't really important.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture then. The office matters, maybe more than we thought recently, but that flexibility is still a non-negotiable for many.
Exactly. It's about having both, it seems.
And thinking logically, if people are going back to the office more often, I guess where that office is suddenly becomes a bigger deal again.
Precisely. As you spend more days commuting, the location and the ease of getting there gain importance. It's practical.
So what are the priorities there? What makes a good location, according to these Nordic workers?
Top of the list, easy access by public transport. Nearly half the respondents highlighted that.
Makes sense. Avoid the traffic jams.
Yeah. Followed by being easy to get to by car, then bicycle, and then being walkable. So convenience of the commute is key.
It really sounds like employers are juggling quite a few different, sometimes competing needs and wants here. Are they adapting? What are companies actually doing?
Well, the report does show a trend where companies are increasingly opting for those activity-based solutions and floating desks, sort of doubling down on flexibility within the space itself.
Even though we just heard workers might prefer more separation.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? But here's another key insight from the employer side.
Go on.
The employers who really make an effort to provide opportunities for exercise and fitness, right there in the office environment, they have the most satisfied employees.
Focusing on well-being.
Exactly. It underlines that growing awareness of employee well-being being critical. And it brings us back to what Helene Lidstrom said, doesn't it? About needing to understand and genuinely cater to those diverse individual employee needs. That seems paramount right now.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together then. If we boil it down, what are the main takeaways for us, for you listening, thinking about your own work situation?
I think the Nordic picture is, well, complex, nuanced, social connection at work, still fundamental, a huge driver for job choice.
Right, the human element.
Definitely. But at the same time, the ability to actually focus, to concentrate without being bombarded by noise and interruptions, that's emerging as equally, maybe even more critical for getting work done and feeling satisfied.
So that tension we talked about.
Exactly, that tension. It leads to this preference for quieter, more focused workspaces, even while people are generally wanting to be in the office more often.
And flexibility.
Still highly valued. That option to work remotely is key. And as the office becomes more central again, its location, how easy it is to get to, that's becoming a much bigger factor.
So as you're listening to this, maybe pause for a second and think,
Yeah.
how does this resonate with you?
Yeah.
Do these Nordic trends feel familiar?
Yeah.
Do you feel that pull between wanting connection and needing quiet? How important is flexibility versus office time for your own well-being, your own productivity? What parts of this really struck a chord with your own experience?
That's a great prompt. And maybe one final thought to leave you with, something to mull over.
Okay.
Given these evolving needs, which sometimes seem to pull in opposite directions, the deep need for community versus the critical need for focus, how might the office itself, its actual design, its fundamental purpose, how might that need to radically change in the coming years? How can it genuinely support both the well-being and the productivity of everyone who uses it? It's a big question for the future of work.